Dr. Elena Morales eased her car into the familiar driveway of her Willow Creek home, her mind still buzzing from a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns and freshly painted fences. A soft breeze rustled the leaves of the oak trees lining the quiet street, and for a moment, it all felt like a scene from a postcard, peaceful, orderly, perfect. But as Elena stepped out of her car, her eyes caught something strange. Bright, freshly painted signs had appeared overnight on nearly every lawn. No unauthorized parking. Violators will be towed. Visitors must register with HOA security. Strict compliance with community rules required. The usually cheerful welcome banners had been replaced with cold, impersonal warnings. Elena frowned. Just last week, the neighborhood had celebrated its annual block party, and neighbors had laughed and chatted well past dusk. Now everyone seemed different, distant, guarded. As she walked toward her front door, she noticed her neighbor across the street, Mr. Jenkins, watering his roses. Their eyes met briefly, but instead of his usual warm smile, he quickly looked away, lowering his watering can as if guilty of some unseen transgression. Elena's heart quickened. Something was wrong here. Inside her house, the warmth of family photos and childhood drawings tried to calm her racing thoughts. She hung up her coat and glanced at the wall calendar. Tomorrow marked the HOA's annual meeting. That was when the new board members, recently elected under a cloud of secrecy, would unveil changes rumored to tighten control over the neighborhood. Elena had heard whispers of stricter parking enforcement, new visitor policies, and even curfews. In the name of community safety, she wasn't a stranger to rules. As a doctor, she lived by protocols. But these felt different. Cold. Authoritarian. The evening stretched on, but Elena couldn't shake the unease creeping up her spine. When her husband called from his late meeting, his voice was distant and hurried, promising to call back soon. Her teenage son Jamie played quietly in his room, oblivious to the tension clouding the house. Suddenly, the sharp trill of the doorbell broke the silence. Elena's pulse quickened. It was late for visitors. Peering through the peephole, she saw two men in dark uniforms with badges clipped to their belts, the newly hired HOA security officers. Their faces were unreadable, professional, but their presence here felt like an invasion. "Good evening, Dr. Morales," one said without preamble when she opened the door. "We're here to remind all residents about the new parking restrictions and visitor registration policies. We noticed some recent violations and wanted to make sure you're aware." Elena blinked, confused. "Violations? I haven't parked anywhere except my own driveway." "We've received multiple complaints," the officer replied, his tone flat. "Please ensure all visitors are registered with the HOA office going forward. These rules are mandatory." As they left, Elena felt a chill settle over her. The neighborhood she had loved, the safe haven where she raised her son, now felt like a fortress with cold guards at the gates. Later that night, as she lay, awake staring at the ceiling, she wondered, what had changed so suddenly? And why did it feel like Willow Creek was no longer the home she knew, but a place watching her every move? Something dark was stirring beneath the surface, and Elena Morales was about to find out just how deep that darkness went. The clock blinked 11:42 p.m. when Jamie's sudden cough shattered the fragile quiet of the Morales household. Dr. Elena Morales shot upright in bed, instantly alert despite her exhaustion. She recognized the signs immediately. Swollen lips, a rash spreading. Fast across Jamie's face, an allergic reaction. A severe one. "No, no, no," she whispered, heart pounding. She scrambled out of bed and rushed to his side. Jamie's breathing was ragged, shallow, too shallow. Elena's mind raced as she grabbed the emergency EpiPen from the kitchen counter, her fingers trembling. Minutes felt like hours. She knew she had to act fast. "Elena, call 911, she instructed, voice steady but urgent. Jamie's eyes fluttered open, panic clear in their depths. "Mom, can't breathe." Outside, the neighborhood was silent, eerie under the moonlight. Elena knew the fastest way to help was to get Jamie into fresh air. She opened the front door and stepped out, carrying him carefully but quickly. As she crossed the driveway, her mind racing through protocols and procedures, she pulled out her phone, dialed emergency services, and kept Jamie's airway open with her other hand. Then came the sound she hadn't expected. Footsteps pounding on the pavement behind her. "Ma'am, you can't park here," barked a harsh voice. Elena froze, heart skipping. Turning, she saw two uniformed HOA security officers approaching briskly, their expressions stern and unyielding. "I'm trying to save my son's life," Elena said, voice rising with desperation. "He's having a severe allergic reaction. I need to stay here." One officer folded his arms. "Rules are rules, ma'am. You're parked in a no-parking zone. We've had multiple violations in this area." Elena's mind reeled. "My son could die if I move him inside right now. Please, I'm begging you, let me stay." But the officers' faces remained hard. Behind them, a few neighbors peeked. Out of their windows, eyes wide, some whispering, others just watching. The tension mounted like a storm ready to break. One officer stepped forward, blocking Elena's path with a rigid posture. "You must comply with the HOA regulations. We're calling the board to report this incident." Elena's voice cracked, desperation spilling over. "Do you know what anaphylaxis is? That my son needs immediate help? You're putting his life at risk over a parking rule." Behind her, Jamie gasped, his face paling. Then, without warning, the situation erupted. One officer grabbed Elena's arm roughly, attempting to move her from the spot. Elena twisted away, shouting, "Get your hands off me! Help is on the way!" Her neighbors began to stir, some stepping onto porches, others peering cautiously through curtains. But no one intervened. Elena's heart pounded wildly. The seconds stretched unbearable. The other officer pulled out his radio, calling for backup. The air felt thick with fear and disbelief. A doctor attacked in her own neighborhood while trying to save her child. Suddenly, the distant sound of sirens pierced the night. Elena's hope flared. Paramedics burst onto the scene moments later, pushing through the crowd and quickly assessing Jamie's condition. They administered life-saving treatment, loading him into the ambulance with care. Elena was left standing on the curb, shaking, staring at the cold faces of the HOA officers as they exchanged glances. No apology, no concern, just enforcement. Neighbors' whispers grew louder, the silence broken by murmurs of shock and confusion. Elena realized then the truth. This was more than just a parking dispute. It was a battle between rigid control and human urgency, a fight that would soon engulf the entire community, and it had just begun. The ambulance's red and blue lights flickered against the quiet homes of Willow Creek, casting long shadows over the street, like an ominous warning. Dr. Elena Morales stood rigid on the sidewalk, her body trembling, not from cold, but from shock and fury. The chaos of the past minutes swirled in her mind, but one thing was clear. The HOA's response wasn't just inappropriate. It was an outright attack on her and her family. As the paramedics rushed Jamie inside the ambulance, Elena caught sight of several HOA board members arriving in their sleek SUVs. Their faces were unreadable masks, a stark contrast to the panic and urgency Elena had felt just moments before. Instead of rushing to help, they seemed more interested in assessing the scene, taking notes and whispering among themselves. One of the board members, a tall man with a sharp jawline and cold eyes, stepped forward, addressing the security officers with a voice dripping in authority. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," he said, then turned to glare at Elena. Rules exist for a reason. You're lucky we didn't call the police for your blatant disregard." Elena's blood boiled. "Are you serious? My son was suffocating, and you harassed me like a criminal." Her voice cracked with a mix of anger and disbelief. "This isn't about rules anymore. This is about basic human decency." The board members exchanged glances, and one sneered. "This is a community, Dr. Morales, and communities thrive on order and discipline. Your actions threatened that order." From the crowd of neighbors that had gathered, a murmur of unease spread. Some faces showed sympathy for Elena. Others looked away, unwilling to challenge the board's authority. The tension was palpable, a silent battle lines drawn between compliance and conscience. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly widow who had lived in Willow Creek for over 30 years, stepped forward from the crowd. Her voice was trembling but resolute. "This neighborhood was built on trust and respect. What I saw tonight wasn't respect. It was cruelty." Her words sparked a ripple of murmurs, and a few neighbors began nodding, emboldened by her courage. But before the situation could escalate further, a booming voice cut through the tension. "Enough!" The HOA president, a man named Richard Caldwell, appeared at the end of the street, flanked by two more board members. His presence commanded immediate silence. Richard's reputation as a strict, no-nonsense leader was well known. He had built his power by enforcing rules with an iron fist. And tonight, he was ready to flex that muscle. "Dr. Morales," he said, eyes cold but calculated, "I understand this is a difficult time for you. But the rules are the rules. If we make exceptions for everyone, we lose control of this community." Elena's jaw tightened. "You lost control the moment you tried to stop me from helping my son." The president's gaze hardened. "Watch your tone, doctor. This is our community. We decide how it's run." The verbal standoff escalated quickly, voices rising, accusations flying. The crowd grew restless, some siding with Elena, others backing the board. The idyllic neighborhood facade was cracking under the weight of conflict. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the nearby street corner. A car had hit a mailbox. The noise startled everyone, breaking the moment. But it was a stark reminder. Chaos was seeping into the orderly life of Willow Creek. That night, as Elena sat beside Jamie in the hospital, the gravity of what had happened began to sink in. The attack wasn't just physical. It was a symbol of a deeper sickness infecting the community. The HOA's obsession with control had blinded them to humanity, and now Elena knew there would be consequences, not just for her family, but for every resident trapped under the HOA's iron rule. The battle for Willow Creek had begun in earnest. The morning sun barely pierced the thick fog that clung to Willow Creek, casting a dull gray light over the neighborhood. Word of the confrontation between Dr. Elena Morales and the HOA board had spread faster than wildfire. What had begun as a quiet community dispute had erupted into a scandal that threatened to unravel the very fabric of Willow Creek. Elena sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. She scrolled through her phone, her eyes scanning message after message, some filled with sympathy and support, others with venom and threats. Anonymous texts warned her to stay quiet and stop stirring trouble, while online posts painted her as either a hero or a reckless rule breaker. Her husband, Mark, stood by the window, tense and watching the street. "I don't like this," he muttered. "The HOA's not just angry, they're gearing up to fight back hard." Elena nodded, her stomach twisting. The community was fractured. Some neighbors rallied behind her, horrified at the HOA's callous behavior during a medical emergency. Others remained fiercely loyal to the board, convinced that rules must be upheld no matter the cost. The neighborhood Facebook group became a battleground. Threads erupted with accusations and defenses. "Rules keep us safe," one post read. Another countered, "What good are rules if they threaten our safety?" Among the chaos, Elena received an encrypted message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old pavilion at midnight. I have information you need." Her heart raced. Was this a trap or a lifeline? Curiosity and fear warred inside her, but her resolve to uncover the truth pushed her to agree. That night, cloaked in a hoodie, Elena slipped out of her house and made her way to the forgotten pavilion at the edge of the neighborhood. The moon was a silver sliver in the sky, and the air was thick with tension. A shadow moved from behind a tree, a figure wrapped in a long coat, face obscured. The stranger handed her a small sealed envelope. "You shouldn't trust the HOA," the voice whispered, low and urgent. "They're hiding more than you know. This is just the surface." Elena's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were copies of emails, internal memos, and photographs, all pointing to a pattern of intimidation, harassment, and rule-bending by the HOA board members. The documents hinted at a concerted effort to silence dissenters and maintain absolute control. Before Elena could ask questions, the stranger vanished into the night, leaving her alone with a heavy weight of suspicion. Back at home, Elena's mind swirled with questions. Who among the neighbors had been coerced into silence? How deep did the corruption go? And most unsettling of all, was her family now in danger? The days that followed confirmed her fears. Strange cars prowled the streets late at night. Someone keyed her husband's car, and Jamie's school locker was mysteriously vandalized. Anonymous notes slipped under their door warned Elena to stop digging or face consequences. Despite the fear, Elena refused to back down. She reached out to a lawyer specializing in civil rights and began documenting every incident meticulously. A community meeting called by the HOA, tensions boiled over. Elena confronted the board publicly, demanding transparency and accountability. The room crackled with hostility and unease. Richard Caldwell, the HOA president, glared at her. "We are here to protect the neighborhood, not to be bullied by one disgruntled resident." But the crowd was no longer unanimous. Whispers of dissent grew louder, neighbors exchanging furtive glances, some nodding in silent agreement with Elena. That night, as Elena lay awake, she realized the fight was no longer just about her son's emergency. It was about reclaiming a community hijacked by fear and control, and somewhere in the shadows, powerful forces were watching, ready to strike again. The courthouse loomed like a fortress against the gray sky, its cold stone steps crowded with murmuring residents and flashing cameras. For Dr. Elena Morales, walking up those stairs was not just about seeking justice. It was a defiant stand against a powerful machine determined to crush her voice. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Elena's lawyer, Ms. Harper, whispered last-minute reassurances, her eyes sharp and steady. The case was now federal, and the stakes had never been higher. Elena was suing the Willow Creek HOA for civil rights violations, assault, and intimidation, charges that sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. As the judge entered the courtroom, a hush fell. The HOA board members sat stiffly at the defense table, their expensive suits and guarded expressions a stark contrast to Elena's determined calm. Opening statements began. The HOA's attorney painted Elena as a reckless rule breaker, a disruptive force threatening the harmony of Willow Creek. "Our client enforces rules fairly and consistently," he insisted. "Ms. Morales acted irresponsibly, endangering the community's safety." Elena's lawyer rose with quiet confidence. "Ms. Morales is a respected physician and a dedicated mother. She faced a medical emergency and was attacked, not for breaking rules, but for prioritizing her son's life over arbitrary restrictions. This case is about protecting fundamental rights." As witnesses were called, the courtroom became a stage for escalating drama. Paramedics testified about the emergency and the delay caused by HOA interference. Neighbors bravely recounted the growing atmosphere of intimidation and fear. Elena's own testimony was a raw, emotional account of that terrifying night. But the HOA fought dirty. Their attorneys introduced video clips selectively edited to portray Elena in a negative light. They called community members loyal to the board, who claimed the rules were necessary to maintain order and safety. The battle of narratives unfolded with increasing ferocity. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy intensified. Headlines branded, "Elena, a hero or a troublemaker," and the Willow Creek neighborhood was thrust into a national spotlight. Residents found themselves caught in a storm of divided loyalties and mounting pressure. Elena received anonymous calls warning her to drop the case, but she steeled herself. The fight was no longer personal. It was a stand for every resident's right to safety and dignity. Midway through the trial, an unexpected twist came when a local reporter uncovered evidence of backroom deals between the HOA president Richard Caldwell and a major real estate developer with plans to buy and redevelop the neighborhood. The revelation suggested that the strict enforcement and intimidation weren't about safety at all, but about forcing residents to sell their homes. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs and gasps. Elena's legal team immediately filed motions to admit the new evidence. Richard Caldwell's face tightened with anger, but he remained silent, his empire beginning to crumble under the weight of exposed corruption. As the trial continued, Elena found herself at the center of a storm, far bigger than she ever imagined. Each testimony, each piece of evidence chipped away at the HOA's facade of control. But just as hope surged, a chilling new threat emerged. Late one evening, a message appeared on Elena's phone. "Stop now, or this will be the last fight you ever have." The warning was clear. The courtroom battle raged on. But outside, unseen forces were preparing their next move. The night outside the courthouse was quiet, but inside Dr. Elena Morales' world, a storm was brewing. The threat she'd received clung to her like a shadow, a sinister reminder that her fight for justice had drawn attention far beyond Willow Creek's neatly trimmed lawns. That morning, Elena arrived early at the hospital, her face pale but determined. Her colleagues noticed her exhaustion, but also the fierce resolve in her eyes. Despite everything, she refused to let fear silence her. Meanwhile, back in Willow Creek, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers of corruption, intimidation, and secret deals reached every corner of the community. Some residents clung to the old order, afraid of the chaos Elena's battle threatened to unleash. Others quietly began to question the very foundation of their peaceful lives. In the midst of the trial, Elena's lawyer, Ms. Harper, called a surprise witness, a former HOA board member named Daniel Pierce, who had resigned under mysterious circumstances months earlier. Daniel entered the courtroom, looking tired but resolute. His testimony sent a ripple through the room. He revealed how the HOA had deliberately targeted residents who resisted new rules, documenting instances of harassment, illegal surveillance, and even threats to force sales of homes to the developer. He described secret meetings held behind closed doors, where board members plotted to tighten their grip on the neighborhood under the guise of community safety. Most shocking was his confession that the HOA had tried to intimidate him into silence, sending anonymous threats that left him fearing for his family's safety. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Elena felt a surge of vindication. The dark truth was coming to light. But the revelations came at a cost. As Daniel stepped down from the witness stand, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A group of men in dark clothing hurried past security, sparking panic. Elena's heart raced as whispers spread that Daniel's home had been broken into the night before. Files and computers stolen, evidence vanished. That same day, Elena received a call from an unknown number. The voice was distorted, cold. "You're meddling where you shouldn't. "Back off, or your family will pay." The warning was unmistakable. Elena's resolve hardened. She doubled down on her efforts, gathering evidence, rallying neighbors, and exposing the HOA's abuses. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Richard Caldwell's empire was unraveling. The real estate developer severed ties publicly, but Elena knew it was only the beginning of a deeper conspiracy. Late one evening, Elena sat in her living room, surrounded by stacks of documents and photographs. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous tip, this time leading to a hidden ledger revealing illicit payments to HOA board members from the developer. Her hands shook as she read the damning proof. Suddenly, the power in her house flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. Loud bang echoed from the back door. Elena's breath caught. Was it a break-in? Another warning? She grabbed her phone and flashlight, heart pounding, and slowly moved toward the noise. But the house was empty. Only a single envelope lay on the floor, addressed to her in bold black letters. Inside was a photo, a candid shot of Elena leaving the hospital late at night, her face weary but unbroken. A message was scrawled beneath. "We see you." Fear wrapped tight around Elena's chest, but she refused to let it break her. The battle was no longer just about an HOA's tyranny. It was a fight for truth, for justice, and for survival. And somewhere in the darkness, her enemies were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The courtroom buzzed with a tense energy as the trial neared its climax. Elena sat quietly beside her lawyer, Ms. Harper, their eyes locked on the defense table where the HOA board members exchanged worried glances. The past weeks had worn heavily on Elena. Sleepless nights, threats, and the relentless pressure of a fight that seemed bigger than her alone. Just as the tension threatened to suffocate her, a man stepped into the spotlight, an unexpected ally with the power to change everything. His name was Aaron Patel, a high-ranking official from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. Wearing a suit that bespoke authority and seriousness, he approached the bench and requested permission to testify. The judge, intrigued, allowed it. Aaron's testimony shocked the courtroom. He revealed that a federal investigation had been quietly underway for months into the Willow Creek HOA. The probe was focused on allegations of civil rights violations, intimidation tactics, and corruption within HOA boards across the state. And Willow Creek was a key example. He confirmed the existence of the financial trail connecting HOA board members to the developer, exposing plans to force residents out to make way for a lucrative redevelopment project. But more importantly, Aaron spoke of the federal government's commitment to protecting residents' rights against abuses by powerful private entities. The courtroom gasped. Elena felt a rush of hope. Finally, her struggle had attracted the attention it deserved. Outside, the neighborhood was abuzz with news. Supporters rallied, energized by the new federal backing. Flyers appeared on doorsteps, encouraging residents to stand with Elena for justice. But the battle was far from over. That night, as Elena returned home, she found her mailbox stuffed with unsigned letters filled with veiled threats and warnings to drop the case. The message was clear. The forces aligned against her were growing desperate. Inside her house, Mark paced nervously. "We're in deeper than I thought," he said. "They're not just fighting the case, they're trying to break us." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we fight harder." Days later, the courtroom erupted in chaos when the defense unveiled a surprise witness, an influential community leader who claimed Elena had a history of reckless behavior, attempting to discredit her credibility. The claim threatened to unravel the carefully built case. Elena's heart sank, but Ms. Harper was ready. With skill and precision, she dismantled the accusations, exposing the witnesses' connections to the developer and the HOA board. The courtroom shifted again, the tide turning in Elena's favor. Outside, tensions exploded as a late-night protest erupted at the HOA headquarters. Residents gathered with signs demanding transparency and justice, their voices echoing through the streets. Police presence increased, but the crowd remained peaceful, united. Elena watched the news coverage from her living room, feeling the weight of the moment. She was no longer fighting alone. Yet the threats persisted. One evening, a brick crashed through her living room window, a chilling message that the enemy was still watching, still willing to escalate. But Elena refused to back down. She poured every ounce of strength into the final days of the trial, determined to win justice for her son, her family, and her community. As the judge called for closing arguments, the air in the courtroom was electric. The story that began with a medical emergency had become a battle for the soul of Willow Creek, and the final verdict would change everything. The courtroom was packed to the brim. The tension was palpable, a collective breath held by every person present. Elena sat tall, her gaze steady as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. The months of struggle, the threats, the sleepless nights, and the fierce determination had all led to this moment. The judge's voice cut through the silence, slow and deliberate. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, this court finds the Willow Creek Homeowners Association guilty of civil rights violations, assault, and intimidation against Dr. Elena Morales and her family. A wave of gasps and murmurs erupted across the courtroom. The HOA board members' faces drained of color, their facade of control finally broken. Richard Caldwell's eyes darted nervously, unable to meet Elena's steady stare. But before the courtroom could fully process the ruling, the judge continued, his tone shifting. However, the court also uncovers a far-reaching conspiracy involving external interests manipulating the HOA's actions. Evidence has revealed that a powerful developer, working behind the scenes, orchestrated the intimidation campaign to drive residents from their homes. Elena's heart pounded. The developer's name was mentioned. A man long thought untouchable, whose influence stretched deep into local politics and business. The judge's final words sealed the moment. This case will be referred to federal prosecutors for a full investigation into these corrupt practices. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted into cheers. Elena's supporters rushed forward, enveloping her in hugs and applause. The victory was not just hers, it was a triumph for every resident who had suffered in silence. Yet, as the celebration unfolded, a shadowy figure watched from a distance, unseen and unyielding. The fight was far from over. In the days that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. The HOA board was dissolved, replaced by a community council elected by residents, committed to transparency and respect. Elena was hailed as a hero, not just for saving her son, but for standing up against oppression. Mark and Jamie found peace returning to their lives, their home no longer a battleground but a sanctuary. Then, in a final twist, Elena received a letter from an anonymous source, a thank you, and a warning. Change is only the beginning. Watch your back. Elena smiled, feeling the weight of the journey but also the fire of resilience burning stronger than ever. She knew one truth. Above all, in a world where power often hides in shadows, courage lights the way, and she was ready for whatever came next.